Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave, on behalf of every father and every mother who waits for freedom, on behalf of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. So this week we have a pretty straightforward show for you. I'm just going to present the news. That'll be followed by Germany to Ukraine segment, and we'll finally have like a little brief panel discussion. I'm going to call what's going on with permission to strike Russia for Ukraine. So yeah, without I should mention before we start. We used to broadcast simultaneously on both YouTube and Twitter. However, Elon has changed some policies, and basically we now have to pay Twitter if we want to broadcast there. And we're not really interested in doing that. I don't know. We might change our mind at some point, but at the moment we've decided we don't want to do that, and so it feels icky to pay them to give them their own content. So we've stopped broadcasting on Twitter. So if you could, you wonderful YouTubers, we really appreciate you guys and your support. It's been really great to move to YouTube, where we have so much more freedom, and obviously, they don't charge us. They've even potentially could pay for things, services that we use and things like that. So please do. We appreciate our YouTube audience, and please do spread the word about us. Please subscribe. Please hit the like button on the stream, and yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of helping us out. We really do appreciate your support once again, and thanks. So I'll go ahead and jump into the news now. So we'll start with operations news. It's a little different this week than usual. Usually I talk about like strikes and stuff, but not a lot what I could find this week. So anyway, starting with a fire broke out at the Omsk-Tronmash plant in Omsk, Russia, where tanks and heavy flamethrower systems are manufactured. The blaze started on the roof of one of the workshops, and no injuries reported. According to plant officials, the fire didn't disrupt ongoing production, although it looks like quite a significant fire, as you can see there. Despite official statements, bystanders shared videos online showing thick smoke billowing from the site. It's part of the Uralvagonzavod there we go. Uralvagonzavod Corporation, which fulfills defense contracts for Russia, including the production of the T-80 tank and the flamethrower system. I have no information about whether this was started by some kind of sabotage or a drone attack. It looks like drone attack. I wouldn't say it's off the table, but no one's saying it was a drone attack, so it seems unlikely. And no one's really directly saying sabotage, so it's kind of a mystery why it happened. But it seems like a pretty big fire. Could be lack of safety. Could be Ukrainian military intelligence. Who knows? Next item. On September 11th, Ukrainian forces, Hur forces, shot down a Russian Su-30 SM fighter jet over the Black Sea using a manpad system. The aircraft was part of the 43rd Naval Aviation Regiment of the Russian Aerospace Forces and was based at the Saki airfield in Crimea. The jet had been targeting Odessa with missile strikes from a distance, staying outside the range of Ukrainian coastal air defenses. However, the Hur unit intercepted the plane near gas rigs off the Crimea coast. Russian forces lost contact with the jet around 5 a.m. and initiated a search and rescue mission 3 hours later, deploying an AN-26 aircraft and an Mi-8 and Ka-27 helicopter. By midday, they discovered aviation fuel, slick, and debris from a downed jet 70 kilometers northwest of Crimea. Sorry. According to reports, the jet had been launching missiles at the Ukrainian mainland. Ukrainian radar picked it up, and they sent the crew to hit it with a manpad, and it was downed by a manpad fired from a boat. So cool little operation by Hur there. Good job, guys. Next item. Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrskyi, briefed President Volodymyr Zelensky on the military situation in the Donetsk region and Russia's Kursk region. In his evening address, Zelensky highlighted the ongoing efforts to maintain Ukrainian positions in Donetsk despite the challenges on the front line. Syrski provided updates on the operations also in the Kursk region, including how Russian forces are responding there. Earlier reports indicated that 83 combat engagements had occurred at the front, with the most intense fighting centered around Pokrovsk and Kurakhove. Also, I believe that Pokrovsk's power and water had been cut recently. So, yeah, situation at Pokrovsk continues to look pretty dire. The BBC, citing correspondent Nick Thorpe, reported that a Russian missile struck the Aya, which is a grain-carrying vessel en route from Ukraine to Egypt, while it was in Romania's exclusive economic zone on the night of the 11th and 12th of November. The Romanian Coast Guard confirmed the incident, which occurred about 55 kilometers from the Romanian port of Sfântu in the Danube Delta. The explosion was reported to local Coast Guard authorities around 11 p.m., and the vessel, which was flying the flag of St. Kitts and Nevis, sustained damage to its port side, including the cargo hold and crane, but managed to continue its journey and reach the port of Constanta. According to the UK-based maritime security company, the missile was launched from Russia shortly after the ship departed the Ukrainian port of Chornomorsk in Odessa. Reuters reported that the strike took place near the mouth of the Danube, with Ukrainian Navy spokespersons confirming that the ship was in Romania's maritime economic zone. The Romanian Navy stated the vessel was outside of their territorial waters and that the vessel hadn't requested any assistance as a result of the attack. Kind of tough ship, I will say. They get hit by a missile and don't even ask for help. Though Romania is a NATO member, the alliance's collective defense guarantees apply only to sovereign territories of its member states and not to exclusive economic zones. The attack was part of a larger Russian operation which targeted civilian ships in the Black Sea, which, as far as I understand, is the first time that's happened, which included a wheat shipment bound for Egypt on the 12th of September. The price of wheat shot up about 2% as a result of these incidents. On the 13th of September, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer revealed that no definitive decision had been made regarding Ukraine's use of long-range weapons inside Russia. Other comments have been made since then. We're going to have a little bit more of a detailed talk. I'll let you know what happened, though, at this most recent meeting between the two leaders, which I think is the most significant. According to Politico, although Ukraine has requested support for long-range strikes from Western countries, they have imposed limits on Ukraine's use of weapons like ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles. Starmer described the meeting as productive and stated that they've come to a strong position on the matter, but clarified that the discussions were not centered around specific military capabilities. He also added that at future talks, they'll involve more participants. The White House's summary of the meeting emphasized their continued support for Ukraine and concerns over Iran and North Korea supplying weapons to Russia. As we know, President Putin said basically it would mean war with Russia if that happened, and they said we're considering that, something to that effect. And they basically said they haven't ruled out the use of weapons. So point is, it was pretty much as far as I could tell, nothing came of this meeting itself, but there have been other contradictory statements since then. So we'll talk about it on the panel, what is actually going on with this in more detail. But I wanted to cover just the meeting itself. Next item. Russia is conducting a reckless sabotage campaign across Europe, according to an op-ed by MI Chief Sir Richard Moore and CIA Director Bill Burns, which was published by the Financial Times. The piece describes Russia's intelligence activities as part of a broader effort to exploit technology for disinformation, aiming to undermine democratic nations. Both Moore and Burns highlighted that the world faces unprecedented challenges, including while there are other security challenges in the world. That's basically what they're saying. Russia's war on Ukraine is a very critical issue. They emphasize the importance of continued support for Ukraine, basically saying Putin can't win or Ukraine can't lose. The op-ed stresses that Russia's actions represent a serious violation of international norms and the UN Charter, and that intelligence agencies will continue to support Ukraine. And they mentioned that Ukraine is an important battleground to understand the evolving role of technology in warfare, including the integration of open source software with military technologies and other things like that. So Just kind of a interesting op-ed from former heads of very high-profile intelligence agencies. We've heard a lot of reports about this sabotage campaign Russia's conducting. So to hear, pretty senior intelligence officials confirm its existence, I think is important. So next topic is economy and aid stuff. It's kind of the biggest topic this week. The Netherlands has faced challenges in assembling a full Patriot air defense battery for Ukraine due to a lack of participation from allied nations. If you guys remember, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I reported that the Netherlands had some Patriot bits of a battery that they said they would combine with other countries to try to send Ukraine a full battery. So yeah, they haven't found any takers. Despite the plan, no allies have joined the initiative within the following 3 months. And as a result, they've decided to transfer the pledged components without completing the full system. The defense minister declared that the radar has already been delivered and the launchers will follow soon. And they emphasized that the Netherlands will continue seeking other nations to contribute additional components for a complete system. The Netherlands also has ordered 2 new Patriot launchers to upgrade 2 older launchers that they have. So potentially they'll send more to Ukraine. So keep up the good work, Netherlands.
Just one quick thing. The 2 launchers they procured, as far as I understand, that's the reprocurement for the launchers they have delivered to Ukraine in 2023. So it's nothing new for Ukraine, just for their army again.
Yeah, he certainly would know more than I do about this. I think there's some kind of relationship between the Germans and the Dutch in terms of these Patriot batteries, right? So that's how you have to know all this.
Yeah. The US has in 2023 the US has delivered a battery or a fire unit, and we have delivered, and the Dutch have, in addition to our unit, have supplied 2 launchers which were integrated in our fire unit, and now they're reprocuring these 2 launchers.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know. Because the head guy mentioned that the launchers will go to Ukraine. Like if you heard that.
The three, yeah. So the announcement from the Netherlands in, I believe, in April or in May, one of these 2 months, was that they are trying to assemble a fire unit from components of different countries, and they have said that they are providing a radar and 3 launchers. And they're seeking for other countries to provide the other necessary components. And so that's something different. The 3 launchers they are now giving to Ukraine is something different than the 2 launchers they're procuring right now from the US. One is for Ukraine, and the other one is reprocurement for their own army.
Okay, got it. Cool. So yeah, I don't know. More good stuff from the Dutch. So next is Finland. There's a lot of aid this week, guys. Finland will send additional defense equipment to Ukraine. They sent a package worth 118 million euros. This brings Finland's total military support to 2.3 billion total. The Finnish minister just emphasized they'll continue to provide ongoing military assistance. Also, in the Nordics, the Swedish government announced the 17th military package for Ukraine. It's valued at 401 million pounds. They're shifting its military support strategy with their package. There are 3 major procurements, which are worth about 600 million Swedish kroner, which is like a quarter or an eighth of the total package. I don't know how to convert that. Sorry, I should have converted all this stuff. But it will include like parts, a lot of parts and stuff. It's going to include ground combat equipment, robot systems, anti-aircraft missile systems, anti-tank weapons, recoilless rifles, anti-tank mines, as well as, I'd say the thing that everyone talked about in this package was the Gripen parts. Like there's basically going to send some Gripen parts to Ukraine. We actually had our Swedish contributor explain exactly like what the deal with this was. So maybe we'll have Erlend clarify. Erlend, do you know like why they sent the Gripen parts?
So they're not sending Gripen parts, but the Swedish government has procured spare parts and funds to make sure that some of the existing airframes will be able to continue to fly, so that Sweden don't need to buy completely new ones for their fleet when they are upgrading them to the E variant, as far as I understood. This will allow down the line some airframes to be freed up, and then they
Okay,
can potentially go to Ukraine. So the whole thing is about basically procuring spare parts and funds to get some airframes ready and available for the next years, basically.
Okay, that makes sense. I think it was a little bit confusing for them to lump that together with the aid package for Ukraine, but it makes sense like why politically or economically they're doing that. So yeah, so the Gripen parts are, as Erlend said, like staying in Sweden, but they're clearly they're designed to, in the long term, help the Ukrainian Air Force in some fashion. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, and the thing is that they were very clear about the fact that they've been asked not to deliver Gripens now because it would interfere with the F-16 integration. I think there is some political messaging from Sweden in this as well.
Okay, got it.
So they're basically saying to the F-16 guys who are pulling the threads there that, yeah, we're still going, on with this and forward with this. It's not stopping. So,
right.
You guys know that we're not stopping with this.
God bless them. Okay, and so yeah, that's Sweden and Finnish military aid. So yeah, good job, guys. Lots of military aid this week. Weirdly, the security conference was last week, but we're getting a lot of announcements this week. So the next item, as part of an ongoing cooperation between the governments of Ukraine and France, Ukrainian railways will receive 19,000 tons of railway rails to upgrade 150 kilometers of railroad track. This information was shared by the Ukrainian Ministry of Communities and Territories Development. There was a discussion between the special envoy of the French president for Ukraine and the deputy prime minister of restoration. And France will deliver the railway rails with the first shipment expected in January of 2025. And yeah, they just kind of talked about how it's good that they're collaborating on these transportation projects and that other joint projects are making consistent progress, with France focusing on regional development and critical infrastructure like railways. And the $200 million grant between Ukraine and France, which I assume like paid for the procurement of this stuff, prioritizes Ukraine's energy infrastructure and essential infrastructure like railroads. Poland remains the only country that has not yet fulfilled its financial commitment to the Czech initiative for purchasing artillery shells for Ukraine. The Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski addressed the delay during a press conference in Kyiv on September 13th, explaining that it was caused by the arrest of the former head of Poland's Government Strategic Reserves Agency, who was responsible for the task. So no one can say they aren't trying to make this right, I guess. Sikorski pledged that Poland would provide $100 million in support for the pledge over 2 years, with half of that sum to be allocated in 2024 and the remainder in 2025. And he assured that Poland is committed to resolving the issue and maintaining their contribution to the initiative as they promised. The Czech initiative, of course, aims to deliver 500,000 shells to Ukraine over the course of the year. And so far, around 20 countries have participated, and the first shipment of 50,000 shells is known to have been delivered earlier in the summer. I would assume more since then, but they haven't been announced. Germany's been one of the largest contributors, and Poland has pledged funds. But again, as I said, they haven't yet sent the money or signed the agreement as of August 2024. They've said they will, but they haven't formally done so. The UK has announced a new $600 million aid package for Ukraine during the Foreign Secretary's visit on September 11th, where he was also joined by the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. This aid covers mainly humanitarian assistance and long-term support. 315 million pounds have been allocated for the 2024 to 2025 period to address humanitarian, energy, and stabilization needs. Around 20 million pounds is aimed at fixing the power grid and preparing it for winter. 100 million pounds for humanitarian support, and 484 million in loan guarantees will be provided through the World Bank for other critical public services. The loan guarantee is part of a $3 billion package that the UK pledged during the Ukraine Recovery Conference in London last year. And they will also supply Ukraine, quote, with hundreds of additional air defense missiles, tens of thousands of artillery rounds, and more armored vehicles by the end of 2024. The United States has also announced a $700 million humanitarian aid package for Ukraine as a result of the trip. The Secretary of State Anthony Blinken made the announcement during his visit. The total amount, $325 million, will be allocated to repair energy infrastructure, and $290 million is earmarked for humanitarian aid intended to support Ukrainians and refugees in the surrounding regions. $102 million will go towards demining efforts to remove landmines. So now this begins what is just like an endless chunk of U.S. stuff. So I'll just kind of power through it. So also in U.S. news, the Biden administration has requested an extension from Congress to continue providing military aid. I mentioned before that some Ukrainian NGOs are raised concerns about this last week. So now the Biden administration is seeking like an extension of this money. There's $5.9 billion in presidential drawdown authority, which 5.8 of that is set to expire at the end of the fiscal year, which I think is like in a couple weeks. And that has so far been the main way that the U.S. has quickly provided weapons and equipment to Ukraine. Most of the aid packages that I cover on the show, that's like comes from PDA. So it's kind of concerning that the administration didn't spend this money when they had it, under their control, and that they now need to renew it. Hopefully it'll get renewed and all that. But yeah. Also, the Ukrainian military has begun using the American 2CT Hawkeye, which is an experimental self-propelled artillery system. There were photos of the system in service that were published by the Czech news agency, which confirmed that the 105 millimeter howitzer reported first delivered in 2024 is being used in combat. It was handed over to Ukraine by AM General, the company, earlier this year. It took 2 weeks to train the Ukrainian crew, and they mentioned previously that it's undergoing combat testing on live targets. The Hawkeye is notable for its soft recoil system, which reduces the load on stabilizing structures by half, making the unit lighter and more mobile than a conventional system. It's mounted on a Humvee chassis, and it's highly maneuverable and can be transported by aircraft or helicopter. And yeah, there's some more statistics about it, but it has a range of about 12 kilometers, and it uses standard ammunition. And it can also use extended range ammunition for 20-kilometer range, and it can fire around 8 rounds per minute. So quite a sophisticated weapon. Also in U.S. news, U.S. chip makers face questions from senators at a hearing about why American-made microelectronics from their companies have been found in Russian weapons in Ukraine. The Senate hearing was titled U.S. Technologies Powering Russia's War Machine and was held on September 10th, 2024. It included testimony from executives at AMD, Analog Devices, Texas Instruments, and the Intel Corporation. They showed data provided by Ukrainian authorities showing that 73% of the recovered components in Russian weapons, I assume electronic components, originated from American companies, with 40% from the companies that are represented at the hearing. And he pointed out that Russia's use of these technologies, Russia uses those to conduct war crimes. The executives insisted that they comply with all U.S. sanctions and that they take additional voluntary steps to prevent their items from going to Russia. And they explained that many of the components are basic microchips that aren't subject to export restrictions and were produced before Russia's invasion. Like they're not newly produced equipment since after the sanctions that are finding their way in. However, Blumenthal raised doubt, citing evidence that newer chips have in fact been found in modern Russian weapon systems, including hypersonic missiles. And he called on the companies to send teams to Ukraine to inspect the evidence firsthand, rather than relying solely on their own internal tracking systems. Blumenthal urged companies to strengthen their controls over microchip sales, particularly through third-party countries like Turkey, Kazakhstan, and Georgia, where transactions involving these products have increased. And the company representatives affirm that they regularly monitor export compliance and that they've intensified oversight of their sales to high-risk countries like those mentioned. Texas Instruments claimed to have no evidence of its products reaching Russia. Intel, AMD, and Analog Devices admitted that they've tightened controls to curb flows of chips that they saw going to Russia through intermediary nations. So sounds like Texas Instruments maybe needs to wake up a little bit because, yeah, Russia wants your chips, guys. Finally, last piece of U.S. news. The U.S. Department of Defense awarded a $1.2 billion contract to Raytheon for the production of AMRAAM, which are medium-range air-to-air missiles. This is an announcement made on September 11th. The contract includes foreign military sales to countries including Ukraine, as well as many others. The AIM-120 AMRAAM is a radar-guided missile designed for beyond-range visual combat. It's usually used by fighter jets, so it would be used by Ukrainian F-16s. And the production of missiles, spare parts, and related equipment will take place in a factory in Tucson, and the expected completion date for the full contract is December 31st, 2028. So probably won't see anything in the immediate future, but it's always good to have these orders in the pipe because it allows some freedom to give existing stocks. Despite sanctions imposed by the US, EU, UK, and Japan to block the sale of aviation tires to Russia, more than 30 million worth of tires from Western manufacturers were imported into the country in 2023. This is according to a Ukrainian government report. The tires, including those made by Michelin, Dunlop, Goodyear, and Bridgestone, entered Russia through intermediaries, which circumvented trade restrictions. Michelin tires accounted for the majority of the imports, with 70% of the total, worth $28 million. These included tires used in the aircraft of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Goodyear, Dunlop, and Bridgestone tires were also found in Russia. Shipments originated from countries such as China, Turkey, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and various Central Asian countries. And some shipments were even traced directly from the West via third-party intermediaries, indicating potential manipulation of transit routes. The National Agency on Corruption Prevention in Ukraine highlighted the possibility of false transit schemes where the tires are getting in through like fake orders where the destinations are changed after the fact. And there's no direct evidence implicating the manufacturers in any of the schemes. Michelin and Goodyear and Bridgestone basically affirmed their commitment to complying with sanctions and promising investigations. Michelin noted that it ceased exports to Russia in March and closed all operations there. And Goodyear and Bridgestone emphasized strict monitoring process. It sounds like Michelin is the main one we have to be concerned with. 70% of the imports were Michelin tires. So hopefully Michelin will conduct an investigation. It seems like that's what we get every time, right? It's like we find tons and tons of a product in Russia, and then the company goes, "Oh, we're complying with sanctions. We don't know anything about that." And like our own investigation found out that we're totally in compliance. So hopefully we'll see some more traction on some of these sanctions. Also in sanctions news, Spain blocked Hungary's attempt to purchase Talgo, which is a Madrid-based train manufacturer, due to concerns that Hungary's close ties with Moscow could compromise Ukraine's reconstruction efforts. The Spanish government vetoed the 619 million euro bid from Hungary's Ganz Mavag over national security concerns, and they actually mentioned the word Ukraine in their like messaging. They didn't say specifically what the concern was, but they said like it's Ukraine related. The company, which is owned by a private equity firm, which is linked to Hungary's leading oil and gas company, has close ties to Prime Minister Viktor Orban, as do all oligarchs in Hungary. And they criticize the decision as arbitrary, of course. The company continues to process Russian crude oil despite the ongoing war in Ukraine, and this raises concerns among Spain and other European countries. The veto highlights increasing tensions between Hungary and other EU countries, particularly due to Hungary's delayed support for actions against Russia, like sanctions. And the Prime Minister of Spain has openly called Orban pro-Putin. A Spanish official told FT that Talgo's advanced engineering, which allows trains to easily switch between Ukraine's wider tracks, like the Soviet-era style tracks, and Europe's narrower tracks, is crucial for Ukraine's transport infrastructure. Ukrainian Railways is currently developing a European gauge line from one part of the country to another near the Hungarian border, and this should help facilitate the integration of Ukraine's rail system within the EU. So this is like a very crucial little piece of technology, and Spain thought that it was important that, a not evil country have control of it, so they vetoed the purchase. So good on Spain. Ukraine and the International Monetary Fund have successfully concluded the fifth review of their extended fund facility agreement, which is valued at $15.6 billion US. The Prime Minister of Ukraine announced that the review confirms that Ukraine has met all quantitative and structural requirements for the end of June 2024. They emphasize that the agreement signals their continued commitment for important reforms and complying with the requests of their international partners. The IMF's board was expected to approve the review, or it's expected to approve the review soon, and that would unlock an additional 1.1 billion in more funding for Ukraine. This marks the first IMF mission to fully operate in Kyiv since the onset of the full-scale invasion, and Shmihal expressed gratitude to the team for their efforts and support. The financial assistance from the IMF and other international partners has allowed Ukraine to cover significant non-military budgetary expenses and enables the government to focus on domestic resources and defense efforts. I don't really have time to go into the full report, but as I mentioned last week, Ukraine has denounced a decision by the IMF to send a mission to Russia to basically assess its current economic status. The EU, several countries, and several spokespeople from the government of the EU have denounced that recent mission, sort of in the same vein as Ukraine. So more on the IMF there. Last piece of economic news, I believe, is on September 13th, the Central Bank of Russia raised its key interest rate by 100 basis points, which marks to be 19%. This is a 2.5-fold increase since the start of the full-scale invasion. And this is the result of financial strain from inflation from the conflict. Russia's oil revenues remain robust, and there are high oil prices, as well as reluctance of Western companies to restrict the transport of the commodity. With inflationary pressures in Russia elevated, the annual inflation rate is expected to be around 7%. Inflation had reached 9% in last month, and the bank highlighted the rapid growth in domestic demand as outpacing supply. Recent economic data from the second quarter of 2024 suggests a deceleration of economic growth, and this is attributed to supply constraints weakening and external demand rather than a reduction in domestic demand. The Russian labor market is also part of the reason why inflation is a problem. It's extremely tight as a result of the invasion. Unemployment is at historic lows, and ongoing labor shortages in the manufacturing sector continue to raise prices. Wages continue to rise faster than productivity, and consumer activity has slowed down a bit, but it remains relatively strong. It's mainly the war economy that's causing all these problems. And they hinted at future rate hikes. Okay, so that was by far the biggest section this week. Next is international relations. I'll go ahead and skip this one. I think I pretty much already covered the meeting between. This is a little different. I mentioned the meeting between the secretaries of state, which happened in Ukraine. That's the one on screen. But actually, the two leaders also met, and they held a meeting at the White House. No, I did cover this. Sorry. I'll go ahead and skip this section. So this week, there was a 6-point peace plan that was proposed by China and Brazil, and President Zelensky reacted to it pretty strongly, labeling it as destructive. The plan was introduced in May, and it's seen as sort of an alternative to Ukraine's own efforts at creating a peace plan, and doesn't include the participation of Ukraine. China claims to be neutral in the war, denying any involvement in providing lethal aid to either side. However, Western nations have argued that that Beijing is increasingly supplying critical resources to Russia. Brazil has also positioned itself as neutral. The country's refused to arm Ukraine, and it has acknowledged that Russia's invasion was a mistake. It's also suggested that Ukraine consider giving up Crimea as part of a peace deal. The 6-point plan refers to the war as a crisis and calls for non-escalation, a peace conference involving both sides, more humanitarian aid, and efforts to prevent nuclear proliferation. In contrast, the 10-point peace plan by Ukraine demands a full withdrawal of Russian troops, accountability for war crimes, and the release of prisoners. A summit in Switzerland promoted the plan, and China didn't attend that conference, and Brazil's representative attended but did not sign the resulting communique. Zelensky sharply rejected this plan, arguing that it fails to support Ukraine's efforts to end Russia's aggression against their country. And he questioned the idea of compromise, emphasizing that giving up Ukrainian territory while civilians are being killed is unacceptable. So far, around 45 countries have expressed support for the plan in some fashion, whereas the Ukrainian peace plan that was handled at the Switzerland conference, 110 countries officially expressed backing by signing the memorandum. India has successfully secured the release of 45 of its own citizens who were illegally conscripted to serve in the Russian military and forced to fight against Ukraine. This is according to a statement from the Indian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The ministry revealed that 50 more Indian nationals are still involved as part of Russian forces, and efforts are underway to bring them back. During Indian Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to Moscow, according to him, President Putin assured him that all Indians who had been misled and forcibly recruited into the Russian military would be released. It's taken a little while, I guess. In connection with these events, Indian authorities have arrested 4 individuals involved in a trafficking scheme in India. And there was also a discovery of another large human trafficking network exposed earlier in March, which was operating across multiple Indian states. It lured young people to Russia with false promises of employment and then coerced them into fighting the war. The investigation led to the seizure of 50 million rupees, which is around $600,000, along with documents and electronic records linked to the trafficking operation. Last item, I'll just cover this very quickly. UK, France, and Germany announced additional sanctions against Iran following confirmation that Moscow has received ballistic missiles from Tehran. This is confirmed on September 10th. They issued a joint statement. They highlighted that the countries previously warned Iran that they would do this if these transfers occurred. And the sanctions aim to address what they called an escalation by both Iran and Russia. Also, the U.S. Secretary of State, during a press conference in London, also commented on this transfer and basically said this allows Russia to focus on using their own missile stockpiles against Ukraine. It gives them more freedom in that regard. So I don't know. I just like compare this to sort of the the South Korean response to North Korea, right? To me, this looks like the right response. You tell them beforehand, we're going to sanction you if you do this. When they do it, you sanction them, and ideally you do it in concert with other countries so that you show them it's like a united response. To me, that seems like this will probably deter Iran from doing this stuff in the future, but maybe not. So last item this week, or last topic, I should say, is just sort of Ukraine domestic news. So first item there. During a recent press conference, Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal announced that Ukraine's military budget faces a significant shortfall of around $12 billion this year. This is the result of the ongoing war. The strain on the budget is intensified by ongoing recruitment efforts and the need to fill vacancies within the armed forces personnel. Shmyhal explained that maintaining military personnel comes at a high cost, with the government spending around $29,000 annually on each soldier who's on the front line. And those in supportive roles receive considerably lower wages, which are closer to the national average income. So in other words, like they need quite a bit of money to keep these guys on the front line. Efforts to address the financial gap are underway, with the government in discussions with the IMF regarding their budget. Shmyhal also noted that the talks have been difficult, as Ukraine must fund their military largely on their own. The international partners have mostly limited their financial support for defense. Like, in other words, when a country like the US gives money to the Ukrainian government budget, it's usually specifically not allocated to the defense budget. So yeah, hopefully Ukraine's able to bridge the gap. They're considering several options, including domestic borrowing, raising taxes, and other financial strategies. Also, one proposal is to increase the military levy. A draft law has been submitted to the parliament, and Ukraine hopes to recover about 50 billion hryvnias from confiscated Russian assets next year, which could also be used to finance the military budget. And last two items this week. The International Committee of the Red Cross has temporarily suspended operations at its Dnipro office after 3 of its workers were killed in a Russian strike on September 12th. The attack targeted the village of Viroluvivka and Konstantinivka in Donetsk Oblast, according to the governor of the region, Vadim Filashkin. In addition to the fatalities, a truck carrying humanitarian aid and a car was destroyed, and 2 other employees of the ICRC, the International Red Cross, were injured. Alexander, a spokesperson for the Ukrainian government delegation of the International Red Cross, confirmed the suspension of activities at the Dnipro office and did not provide a timeline for reopening. The office itself was not a direct target, but ongoing strikes in the region continue to threaten personnel who work at the Red Cross on the front lines. At the time of the attack, the team had been preparing to distribute firewood and fuel briquettes to local residents. They'd been actively distributing aid during the strike, and they mentioned in their report that had they been actively distributing aid during that strike, the number of casualties could have been higher. Despite the incident, ICRC in its official statement refrained from naming the perpetrator of the attack in their statement. They didn't blame Russia. They basically just said like a tragic strike happened and killed people, stating they're uncertain about the identity of the attackers. This cautious stance drew criticism from the president of Ukraine and, of course, like a lot of people online, as they were reluctant to attribute the strike to Russia. And obviously, Ukraine said this is another example of Russian terror. On the same day, Russia also attacked other places, other civilian targets, including the village of Konstantinivka I mentioned, as well as the village of Borova in Kharkiv. And that attack killed 5 people and injured 9 others. U.S. This is just a brief thing that I forgot. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Management and Resources, Richard Verma, announced the United States has implemented special import restrictions on cultural artifacts from Ukraine. They spoke at the Ukraine House in Washington. Verma explained the new measures are designed to help protect Ukraine's heritage by preventing the trafficking of cultural items that are Ukrainian and ensuring that looted artifacts are returned to their rightful place. Verma stressed that Ukraine's cultural heritage is a key element of their national identity and has become a target of Russian aggression. He expressed confidence that Ukraine, with international support, will prevail. So, just a good little thing from the U.S. to help prevent the trafficking, particularly of Russian looted Ukrainian cultural artifacts. And the last item this week, sadly, I couldn't find any updated information on it. So the most recent information I have about it is as of 2 days ago. A Russian attack on civilian infrastructure has left 151 miners trapped underground at the Dobropilya mine in Donetsk Oblast. Mikhailo Volinets, the head of the Confederation of Free Trade Unions of Ukraine, so I assume the miners' union, reported the incident on Facebook, stating that the city and nearby areas lost power as a result of the strike, and that caused the coal mine to be cut off from electricity and the miners to be trapped. Without power, the mines are facing dangerous conditions, including gas buildup and flooding. And Volinets added that the situation poses a serious risk to the health of the miners and the stability and safety of the mining equipment, which could be severely damaged due to the ongoing flooding in the mine, because they don't have like the pumps to get the water out. So hopefully there's been some change in the situation that's positive. That's the report as of 2 days ago that they were trapped. So that wraps up my news report for this week. I will go ahead and turn it over now to my colleague, German Aid to Ukraine. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Hello, guys. As always, I will now present the most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. We have 3 items this week. Let's start with the delivery of 23 ambulances designed as mobile intensive care units, which were co-financed by the American and German governments. These vehicles were handed over to the Ukrainian Ministry of Health by the WHO on Wednesday. They are being distributed among regional emergency and disaster medicine centers. Whoa, what a sentence. For example, in Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Odessa, Sumy, and other regions. A day later, according to the Zaporizhia Regional Military Administration, a backhoe loader and a double-cab transporter financed by the German government were handed over to a unit of the Municipal Special Paramilitary Emergency Service. I just want to point out from a German perspective, the word backhoe loader sounds quite funny or dirty, however you want to say it. Anyway, this special equipment will help ensure safety, efficient logistics, and the restoration of normal life in areas affected by the Russian war of aggression or emergencies. And already as the last item of this week, for the video of the week, I wanted to show you an iconic video of a German-delivered Gepard Spark. The video, let me just pause it for 1 second. The video, which was recorded already in 2022, shows one of the Gepard Sparks intercepting a Russian cruise missile. For this video, I actually want to be silent for a second so you can enjoy it and also hear the Gepard shooting.
Есть контакт!
Сука.
Есть, бля, родимая, готы, суку!
Very good. And yeah, that's basically all I had for you this week. Back to you, Joseph.
Oh, you're already done? No, that's nice. That must be nice. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I have some other things, but with Tochnyi, I always try to, not to extend it a lot. I mean, like if everyone wants, I can talk more for some other stuff which is unprepared now. But I mean, there are other things happening in Germany, but I only want to use up as much time as needed from you guys. I really value the time of our viewers, and I don't want to, spam them with messages which are might not that interesting to them. That's why I always just cover the most important stuff.
Ouch.
There was nothing against
I'm
you.
just kidding.
Honestly, your news segment can't be compared to mine since you cover basically everything except Germany, and I'm just focusing on Germany.
Yeah, I think this week I cooked a little too hard. Probably could have made it a little more concise. But yeah, no, I appreciate it. I was just messing with you. But yeah, thanks for your report. So I think the one thing I wanted to discuss this week, as I mentioned, like the two foreign secretaries and the two secretaries of state, I think, met in Ukraine this week in Kyiv, and the two leaders met this week of both the UK and the US. And so basically, we've gotten so many bizarre, contradictory statements. Here's like my general understanding, okay? At the beginning of the week, as far as we understood, the US has always been squirrely about this. Like, people who ask them questions in Washington, like the Washington reporters, when they ask them to clarify this matter, you always get some weird answer that's never like no or yes. It's always something kind of strange. But our understanding of the matter, based on like triangulating all the different answers they've given over the last like year, was that like long-range strikes in Ukraine are prohibited by the US government. And as a result, like they're leaning on other partners like the UK as well to restrict that. The one country that like doesn't care is France. They've just handed Ukraine the keys and said, go nuts. And that was their position up until recently. Now there's sort of discussion that there's been movement on the issue. I don't think that anything specific has been said, but there's a discussion that there's been like movement on the issue. There was also an unofficial report that like basically there's been a decision made that sort of allows them to do this in some capacity, but that it won't be announced. There's also been a sort of denial by both governments, I think, the UK and the US, that there's been any real change in the policy. They basically have said every possible change has happened and every possible change hasn't happened. So I'm pretty confused about it. And I was curious, maybe we'll go to Erlend first and then Germany to Ukraine. Like, what is your guys' understanding of the current policy? And like, did the policy change this week? That would be my question. Go ahead, Erlend.
Well, we got a message from the president, Biden, that they're working on it. And my interpretation is that there's a policy change. But then there's also this caveat where obviously the US is very concerned about Ukraine striking long-range targets. They say it's because of escalation management. I think there might be some other things into this as well, but let's say it's because of escalation fear. So fear that Russia feels too threatened about its own national security, so that they will have to resort to stronger means. And in this case, I mean, Russia is all in on Ukraine with conventional weapons. The only thing they're not doing basically is because they actually already struck a civilian ship. So they thought they did that now as well in transit. Of course, they could be escalating that and start sinking civilian ships transiting to Odessa. But the big scare is, of course, the use of weapons of mass destruction, whether it being chemical, but mainly the fear of nuclear weapons being used. Another escalation could also be that Russia is directly taking action against targets in the West, maybe infrastructure, maybe infrastructure related to transfer of weapons, etc. So maybe airports, trains, train lines going into Ukraine, etc. I think the US wants to somehow put some restriction on this long-range use. So let's say they allow striking airfields, but they don't allow striking critical infrastructure that has to do with the Russian nuclear capacity. For instance, this could be one of the things that they want to prevent Ukraine from doing. The problem is when the US directly involves itself in the targeting, so basically approving or not approving a target, then there is another issue, which is that the argument that we are not a direct, like the West isn't a direct part of the war, is kind of violated, because if you in the command structure have not only supplying information, so intelligence and weapons, but you're actually a part of the decision making chain, then Russia has actually some arguments for us being directly involved with the war, so NATO. I think they want to try and find a structure or a policy that can avoid basically any direct involvement, and also satisfy the needs of the really scared ass people that think Russia is gonna nuke everyone if we kill too many of their airports. That's my point of view. That's what I think. I think when Biden messages that clearly, and we have Blinken in Ukraine, etc., I think the US has decided. But yeah, another thing is also having this uncertainty is a part of escalation management in itself, or actually an escalating factor. So Russia right now might not know if Ukraine is allowed to strike, which means they might be more careful about parking their airplanes in all these airports there. And by the way, this is a ISW map. Actually, this map is very good because it illustrates very well what some US officials have been lying about to the press repeatedly, over and over again. Kirby, the spokesperson, and what's the female spokesperson again in Pentagon's name? What's her name again?
I don't know her
Yeah,
name.
of course. Both of you don't know her name.
I'm so sorry.
Just because she's female.
No. Oh my god.
Just kidding.
Hey, don't me too me here online. Anyways,
Sabrina Singh.
Yes, Sabrina. She and Kirby has been lying to the press over and over again, saying that there is nothing that can be hit with these attackers. So ISW put this map out, and I think that's very good that the ISW did that.
Yeah, I think there was some comment by the Ukrainian Air Force that like 90% of the planes have been moved like out of ATACMS range. But I mean, that's just planes. That's, and it doesn't, there's still 10% of the planes, and I don't know, that doesn't mean there's no targets, right? I think that's like a huge leap to make from Russia has relocated 90% of their planes for now to there's no targets.
There's also like air defense targets. Right. Ukraine has been hitting a lot of S-300 and S-400 facilities in occupied Ukraine, and also some in the Kursk area, etc. But they've not been able to hit S-300 and S-400 systems that have been situated just on the border outside occupied Ukraine because they're in Russia. But they cover extensively into also Ukrainian held territory, which means they are not able to fly their jets along the front lines. Imagine the difference if you can hit all those air defense targets. Imagine the difference in the airspace for Ukraine. It's huge. So they're lying their teeth out, and I don't know why they have been told to lie about this specific thing, because it's it's so easy to just debunk. But yeah. By the way, buonasera, Daniele. We're talking about this kind of weird messaging from the UK and the US about permission of the long-range strikes.
So yeah, I think you did a good job explaining like your take, Erlend. More Germany to Ukraine. Like, do you have a different take or different thoughts on it? Did you like kind of see the same situation we saw, or did you see it differently? Go ahead.
Well, I think Erlend explained most of it already, so I don't need to add so much to it. Just for the part where he spoke about the like not getting too involved too much. I don't know if people can relate that here. I believe every German can 100% because it really, really, really reminds me of the debate we had here in Germany for over a year regarding Taurus, because there was a question which was asked and answered on a daily basis for many, many months. Because Scholz, if all of you remember, wanted to control how Ukraine uses these cruise missiles, or at least it was a discussion and stuff about it. I mean, he even went, or the chancellor even went to the manufacturer and asked like how they could prevent Ukraine from striking certain targets, limiting the range, geofencing, blah, 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 all these kind of stuff. So they actually were plans to deliver Taurus to Ukraine. The manufacturer just couldn't rule out that the Ukrainians were removing the restrictions on their own. I mean, we're talking about the Ukrainians, right? Like when somebody can do it, probably the Ukrainians. And it just reminds me of the whole Taurus debate where we are like saying, okay, they need to do this or they need to do this. And then Germany is not involved too much. And when I recall correctly, it was like for the target controlling, you would need to not send military personnel or personnel of the government itself, but personnel of the manufacturer, which is, of course, qualified in, you know, on a technical level that they actually can control certain things like target programming and stuff like this. And since it's a private company and not government owned, or there are no soldiers from a different country involved in the target programming and all this kind of stuff, everything is fine. But of course, this also involves a certain trust from a government to a private company from that country. But this was, when I recall correctly, the German way of doing it, that they would basically send either personnel from MBDA or from Tower Systems to Ukraine for them to watch over which kind of targets they're hitting. Of course, this would still remain the question when the Ukrainians actually want to target a specific person, regardless of what the private company says, how would they prevent Ukrainian military from actually doing so? So let's say the US is saying, hey, don't strike air defense sites. You're just allowed to target airfields. And then the Ukrainians actually want to program a missile to strike an air defense site like an S-400 battery or whatever. How should the private company actually prevent the Ukrainian soldiers from doing so, right? Besides saying do, or, you know. So that's another question. But there are like possible scenarios where they could do it. And in my opinion, they just need to ask the Germans, because we have planned everything through.
Yeah, it seems like we're talking mostly about the political kind of decisions. As far as like the technical decision in terms of like, could Ukraine launch the missile in terms of like mission planning and all that without foreign assistance? My understanding, based on like John and Fabian talking mostly, is that like there are ways that we could give Ukraine the missile and just hand them the keys and just walk away. It wouldn't be optimal. Like, in other words, it would be better if we got more involved in the mission planning, because that would probably mean a better result. But, you know, we could do that. Do you guys have any comment on that? We'll try. I don't want to really say more than that. I just know Fabian made a post to the effect of like, you know, we don't need to be part of the mission planning process. for technical reasons, right? Do you guys have any comment on the technical side or no? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to quickly point it out because I was also asked during the whole Taurus debate because the Bundeswehr said they have some special equipment which needs to be involved and stuff like this, which is of course a bullshit. I mean, we have delivered Taurus to Spain. We have delivered them to South Korea. Do you really want to tell me that South Korea needs permission and specific technical stuff which only the Bundeswehr has from Germany? So we are sending equipment and Bundeswehr soldiers to South Korea for them programming targets within North Korea. This is of course bullshit. So yeah, just from my perspective, we already had this discussion. They don't need us.
Yeah, I agree. I think like John and Fabian are pretty straightforward and correct on this. Do you have anything else to say about like the technological capacity to do the targeting, Erlend? Like why the Western countries need to be more involved?
Well, when it comes to ATACMS, I think it's bullshit to the highest degree of that you can find. It's just people lying again, finding excuses. But when it comes to Taurus and Scout PG Storm Shadow, there is some technical things that has to do with updated imagery and ground level radar data that could be something they need from the US, but in the end, I don't think so. I think France that really found a way to be self-sufficient on that, like they are with everything else in their military capacity. So I'm sure that if the French figured it out, there's a way to just transfer that capacity. And the Ukrainians will be able to do what they need with it. Maybe there will be some limitations. I'm not a missile expert. Probably Daniel has a lot better insight into this.
Yeah, you refer to mission planning of the Storm Shadow.
Yeah, well, there's been excuses made both. I think they're talking about the Storm Shadow, but they kind of make it sound like it also is valid for ATACMS. As far as I know, for ATACMS, it's mainly coordinate based. It's a ballistic
because
missile.
it's a ballistic missile. There is no cruise phase. I mean, there is a boost phase and then a ballistic phase. So once you know the coordinates, that there is nothing else. For ATACMS, it's much easier. And as you said, for Storm Shadow, there are some more input to be in place, but the system was anyway developed not as in collaboration with US. So all the type of information somehow France, Italy, and UK are able to gather these by themselves. So I don't see why there is a need of US data. Of course, more data, and if the quality of the data that you input is better, of course, the outcome could be of a much better outcome. But I mean, it's not something that is required, that you have to knock to the door of the White House and ask for permission. It's completely, honestly, on this situation, I'm very, very upset because I don't see why a weapon system that has been designed and built in Europe needs the approval of US. There is no reason whatsoever. Is a weapon system paid by taxpayer in Europe, so should be available at the disposal of the Ukrainian if the French and the British are happy with that. I exclude Italy because the contribution to on Storm Shadow is minimal and laughable, whatever the Minister of Defense of Italy, Crosetto, says. So I just read an article from the previous Minister of Defense of UK, and he signed a letter with the other MPs to ask the current government, the UK government, to go ahead whatsoever without waiting for the US. So taking the lead, as was for the tank. And I think this should be the way. UK, at least UK, should give the the go ahead without any reservation, and then probably this will break the ice because at some point the other will follow somehow.
Yeah, so I just want to say, like, I don't think anyone. I'd rather have like John or Fabian. Maybe we'll get Fabian on one day, or if John's super busy because of school. But if we can get John or Fabian on to talk a little bit more technically about how missiles and targeting missions work and all that, and like the technical stuff behind like how much involvement would have to be had. If people are interested in that, we'll try to get them on to talk about it. But I think like our broad understanding is good enough to say the issues here are like political. I think Erlend's right to say they're trying to figure out where the political line is that would allow them to plausibly say, we're just giving Ukraine the weapons and we're not involved directly. Because if we are involved directly, I would agree with Erlend that like there's a case to be made that we're basically in hostilities with Russia at that point. If we have like people in our military structures making decisions about like, let's kill those Russian troops right there, that is, some kind of thing that's going on, and it would be better to leave the decision to Ukraine, in my opinion. So, hopefully they're going to find an acceptable line and stake out a policy. I mean, is that where we leave it, Erlend?
Well, I think it's going to be really difficult, and in the end, it's probably going to result in Ukraine being the decision maker at the ultimate level anyways. I just want to clarify something. I didn't mean that if even France figured it out. I mean, I think Ukraine is going to figure it out because they will be provided with the data they need, because France has managed, like with all their other weapon systems, to be completely ITAR-free on this system, which means that they have the main source of the data input they need, and they can gather that from their sensors, and they're totally independent from the use of, for instance, US satellites, where there's been a discussion about that the Storm Shadow might be, that the British might be inputting data that they basically acquire from the US because they have more satellites with better sensors. So I hope I clarified that for the people that misunderstood, or I maybe misspoke. Daniela.
No, yeah, I have one point. One essentially was the UK very recently have started its own spy satellite campaign. So I think it was mid-August, one of the first military all UK spy satellite was sent, was a ISR spy satellite. So I think all these things, of course, that do not come only due to this, but I think has been boosted by the realization that you can trust your allies until to a certain degree. And so many countries, I think, will start to think about more a collective, even in Europe, a collective way to gather information from space and other, and also by other means. Europe has a very large space capability, so they can very easily build a fleet of spy satellites. But the other point is that I would disagree with one point about I don't think we should care at this point to be involved in direct confrontation with Russia, because are we not? I mean, they consider us as a threat, and they treat us as a threat using whatever method they can, except the kinetic, because they know that at this point they can't do much, but they are doing their best to destabilize and to create problems, even serious problem, in all the countries in Europe and also US. And I take this as a very serious matter, because the democracies are strong but also very fragile, and they know this, and they are doing their best to disassemble them. And this is a very large, aggressive movement from a country that we are trying to deter without doing anything. I mean, without doing anything up to a certain limit. But I think all the red lines, which of course these podcasts today also talk about, have been passed, and has been demonstrated that this threat of the nuclear response is completely useless, also on a tactical point of view. So I don't see why we shouldn't do more bold action in order to ensure that the Kremlin and Putin and all the oligarchs around him understand that there is no turn back to what was before, because every politician try to say, oh, but if we do too much, maybe we break some relationship. The relationships are already broken. There is nothing to build apart a wall or like a demilitarized zone between us and Russia. And I don't understand all these cautious approach, because this is not prior the invasion. No, it's not prior Crimea. It's after more than 10 years of constant asymmetrical warfare. So I think I'm quite sick about talking about, oh, we should not get involved directly. We are not maybe with the troop there, but we are, because they are jamming GPS signal all around the north part of Europe, the North Sea. They are doing this also in the Black Sea, creating also further other issues. They are destabilizing all democracies with disinformation in Europe and in US. I mean, what they have to do else? They're not going to march on our capital now, because of course they don't have the capability now. But what we are waiting? I don't know. Sorry.
I must admit, it is a truly based position. I'm a bit more cautious than you, I think, but I mean, I can't deny that what you're saying is courageous. And I want to agree with it. I'll put it that way. But I also wanted to mention this week, Erlend, if I remember, it was this week. The Nordic countries had that conference, or that televised thing. Was that this week?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to talk about that very briefly? Like, basically,
Sure.
Here's my understanding for the non-Nordics, right? The Nordic countries, because they're so coordinated on the Ukraine issue, or because there's so much to talk about, they just said, why don't we have all of our foreign ministers get together and we'll televise it? And they all just kind of got together and had like a televised discussion of what's going on. Would you say that's an accurate summary? Go ahead.
Well, yeah. So need to be explained that there is so most Scandinavians, Swedish, Norwegians, and Danes can understand each other speaking the respective language, at least to some degree. For me, it's not a problem to understand Danish or Swedish at all. It might be from some other Norwegian, but most have a basic understanding of the other languages. So that facilitates these kind of things. And on top of that, in Finland, Swedish is the second language. So you need to take Swedish in school. In some areas of Finland, they speak Swedish as a first language as well. So they basically sent their minister, which is best in Swedish, I think, on this thing. But yeah, they had foreign minister of Norway, Denmark, the defense minister of Sweden, and a foreign minister of Finland, I think, in this debate in Copenhagen. And it was just like any other televised debate. It's just a little bit weird because you normally don't have politicians from other different countries debating each other in any way or form, because you have the problem of diplomacy on top of that. So they were a little bit careful about each other countries, but they had some journalists and defense analysts, etc., in the mix in the debate, which it kind of sprited up the thing a little bit. Like you had the Swedish journalist, I think, basically saying like, hey, Norway, you have all this oil money, but look at Denmark and Sweden, how much money they are giving to Ukraine, and you earn enormous amount of money because of the war. So what's happening with the support? Why are you not increasing it? So it was pretty good. I would say that Espen Barth Eide, which is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway, was pretty bold in the signaling that Norway will increase the support, but he didn't say, of course, to what amount, because there is going to be a meeting this week at Parliament between all the big parties, or all the parties in Parliament, about the Nansen program, which is the 5-year support program for Ukraine. Hopefully, it's going to be increased by a lot. I don't think doubling it is going to be enough, to be honest. But I think we're going to see an increase, probably less than what we hope, but hopefully it's going to be a very substantial increase, and also will change some of the policies or customs that they had when it comes to allocating money, because we're mainly paid for defense products from Norwegian companies, while we can see Denmark putting money into producing artillery systems in Ukraine, and it's obviously paid off, as they already delivered just 2 months after the announcement. So yeah, I really hope that we're going to see some big changes from Norway. On the other hand, it was also very interesting to see the Danish foreign minister being very ballsy about Scandinavia or the Nordic countries as a whole, and how actually big they are if they put them together and act together. So
was this the Danes' idea? Is that clear, like whose idea it was? Because it's very smart, whoever, if it was their idea.
I don't know who had the idea.
We're
Probably
a very
the
small country. Welcome to Copenhagen. Now, please let me share with you my very passionate beliefs about what we need to do with Russia.
Yeah, they were also kind of ballsy. Like he was also kind of ballsy about the U.S. and basically blaming a lot of the drip feeding. He said directly about U.S. aid to Ukraine, and also I think mentioned that Europe has delivered a lot more aid to Ukraine than the U.S. So we're paying up for our past kind of mistakes, was kind of some of the messaging, referencing the fact that we underfunded our military for many years. So he was very proactive in his messaging as well. I think it was interesting, and the good thing about it is that I think it's going to increase the demand, the public demand, on delivering aid as quick as possible. Yeah. So it was cool. I hope we're going to see it again.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. It seems like a really positive step towards coordinating the Nordic countries towards like a more unified and bold Ukraine policy. So yeah, good news all around. I saw you pulled up some mappies there, Erlend. Did you have anything you want to say about that before we wrap up?
Yeah, so this is from Andrew's map, Ukraine Daily Update. So I have this limited functionality. I can go and extract data from more than one day. If you're an end user, you can only see one day at a time, but I wanted to share this. So this is from 1st of January, only this year, missile strikes and airstrikes. I think some of the data is falling out because I think there should be more missile attacks. I probably need to change the search query, but just look at the amount of airstrikes. It's absolutely insane.
And this is January.
From January until today.
Oh, from January to today. Got it.
Yeah. And then we have politicians in the West fearing escalation if Ukraine is allowed to do something about this. And I just thought it can illustrate the absolute ridiculous notion that is, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's absurd. I mean, we've seen this with pretty much every issue. I think probably the best parallel example here is the Kharkiv stuff, right? It was like for what, 6 months or 8 months, the Russian military was shelling Kharkiv. We weren't allowing Ukraine to shell back. Russia was killing civilians all the time. It was like a terrible situation in Kharkiv. Finally, we said, let them shell back. And I'm not going to say that it's been quiet ever since, but like the situation's improved immensely since that happened for Kharkiv, right? So like, I don't know. It's just, it seems pretty obvious that this will definitely save Ukrainian lives and it will help improve their situation. And like all these other things, it's frustrating to watch us have to go through the motions like this every time and go, I don't know, escalation, this, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, even though I want to see it done like responsibly, I obviously like I want to see movement on it, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, so I think if unless our panel has anything else, Erlend, do you have anything else, other topics or anything?
Well, I thought maybe we can look a little bit on the Kursk map as well.
Sure.
One sec.
I stay away from the frontline stuff because I don't
I
know.
need to open the map again.
I leave that to Andrew. You can always check out
So,
Andrew
as
with
people
map.
may know, Ukraine did well. There's been a little bit of a setback for Ukraine in Kursk. Oh no. Oh, there, I got it. Sorry. So basically, I think it was on Monday we got the message that Russia had a successful attack towards Snagost, which had been in firm Ukrainian control for weeks. And this area was very important when Ukraine took it because it immediately put Koronevo in a very difficult situation because they could push up to this. It's also because of the geography here and the fact that Ukraine had blown up all the bridges on the same river, which meant that keeping this area was already difficult for Russia, and they needed to put a lot of resources into stopping the Ukrainian forces here. Because if Ukraine manages to pass it and penetrate the Russian lines here and reach this road, Koronevo is basically fallen. So this area was very important, not necessarily because they absolutely had to go and take Koronevo, but just having this threat for Koronevo made the situation very difficult for Russia. Something happened, and as far as I know, whoever was in command of the defense here needs to get, you know, they should probably not be in command of such a critical tactical situation ever again, because a column or two columns, I think, of Russian armed, basically armed assaults manages to pass on the road all the way down to Snagost and put all the Ukrainian forces in here in a terrible situation. And they got unhindered all the way up here. And they managed to arrive all the way to Snagost. Whether those vehicles are still exist, I don't think so, but they managed to put a lot of Russian forces down here as well. And apparently there's still fighting going on. The clarity of who's actually in control in all of these villages is still unclear. But Andrew marks it as under Russian control as of 2 days ago. Yeah. But then 2 days ago as well, we get messages that Ukraine has breached in at least two places, and the largest breach has been here, just south of Veseloye. So basically between what Ukraine already controlled and Tochnyi, which is this place where Ukraine had an incursion last year as well. And apparently Ukraine has been probing here and also further north, putting the Russians into alert. This incursion here, or assault, opening up essentially a new front, is obviously to counter the fact that the Russians have taken control over some more area here and put this whole area under pressure. And as many know, there's been a lot of discussion about what is Ukraine going to do about this part of Glushkovo, which is on the southeastern part of the Sami River, which is now all the existing infrastructure, bridging infrastructure has been destroyed, but the Russians are constantly putting down pontoons. So all these red symbols are pontoons, and then these black ones are bridges. And now we have the answer. They're going up here. Unknown for now to what amount the Ukrainians have actually captured or is controlling here. But the Russians are definitely complaining about it on Telegram and saying, like, who the hell is in command there? Now we have all these troops trapped in between the Ukrainians. But we'll see. I think this is kind of a little bit of a desperation from Ukraine, because what happened there was very unfortunate. In my opinion, they should have never allowed this to happen. This could put the whole invasion into Kursk into danger, in my opinion. So, critical developments in the Kursk front. Not ideal, because Ukraine put a lot of effort and also is making a lot of putting a lot of emphasis on it in their diplomacy, that this is a major success, etc. So they really can't afford to have big issues here. Like, they need to stop this. They need to actually hit back, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's all good analysis, man. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I know Andrew had a lot of stuff to map today. He was very tired. We told him to go sleep. Don't be on the stream. So thank you for picking up the slack there and showing some of Andrew's updates for us and explaining what's going on. Okay, I don't think Erlend has audio right now. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the stream from there. Hopefully, you can hear me, right, Germany?
I can hear you now. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, just making sure it wasn't me. So yeah,
I was trying to trick him. When I was not responding on purpose, and
I was starting to sweat a little bit because you didn't answer right away.
Yeah, just 1 second, because there was a question. I've noticed it like 40 minutes ago from Kellen. Yeah, Q&A. I don't know if if someone else had a question, but I saw a question from Kellen. I just want to answer. Showing on the screen to you. Do you think Scholz is now wanting UA to see, so Ukraine to see territory for peace? Or is there's an icon over it, sorry. Or is this just a silly Western media clickbait? The problem with Scholz always is that he talks very weird. Like there was an interview just days ago where he said, we need to now seek peace faster. Basically, he was saying this than we are doing right now. Which of course led to a lot of speculations, where his spokesperson just a day later had to clarify. It's just, they are working towards a peace, but they're not forcing peace on Ukraine. So he clarified it's all about a peace with Ukraine can live for. Basically, Ukraine gets all of their territory back, all what they're wanting for. So the compensation of damage and the captured soldiers or in general the POWs need to return to Ukraine. All this kind of stuff, and only then that's when this is a peace with which Ukraine can work for. This is what Scholz wants, basically. At least that's what what his spokespersons are saying. With Scholz personally speaking, it's always a bit. I definitely see where the media is getting this from, and I honestly can't rule out that Scholz would accept. He definitely would accept such a thing if Ukraine themselves propose it. He wouldn't say, "Hey, go on." He would definitely accept it very, very gladly. But proactive, I don't think Germany is in any position to actually tell Ukraine to cede this or that territory. In my opinion, honestly, the only country which actually can do it is the US. in my opinion, because they are providing the biggest share of military aid to Ukraine. Apart from that, no, Germany, no. It's unless Ukraine actually wants to, or the US also forcing Ukraine to do that. I don't think that would happen. No, even if Scholz wants to.
And then we just had one other question from Kellen, which kind of dovetails into this, which is like, do you think I think maybe I'll rephrase the question to be like, what are the circumstances where the US would cut off, like would issue some kind of threat or warning to Ukraine, like, oh, we're going to cut this off? I personally, I don't know. I don't even think I would want to speculate. It's just like maybe too much of a speculative thing. I don't know. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that?
No, not from my side. That's too speculated.
Yeah, but I think it's true. I think Kellen's right that like it would take a lot for that to happen. I don't think it would be that the US would do that lightly. So, I think that's probably the case. So yeah. Any other questions that I missed?
At the end, I believe one for Erlend.
Yeah. So if the Nordic minister mentioned the possibility of closing the straits, no, but I know that Denmark has like officially banned Russian ships from entering harbor or going to port, and they also reserved their rights to board vessels passing in the straits. So this Kattegat Strait here is very important for Russia because they need to be able to reach their harbors in Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg. And because of the law of the seas, even if they actually have to pass into Danish and Swedish territory, maybe even Norwegian here, they have the right to passage even with warships and whatever commercial ships they want. So they can pass either under the bridge or over the tunnel between Denmark and Sweden here, even if it's actually inside territorial waters of Denmark and Sweden. So yeah, it's a problematic thing because it would, according to some interpretation of international law, can be seen as a declaration of war. So I think that's kind of far from reality, to be fair. Even though I would like to see it happen, I don't think it's going to happen.
It needs like a Montreux Convention, right? That seems to be what's helping in the Black Sea, where like Denmark just says, we're not going to let anyone's warships from any countries in. We're talking about Russia. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the thing is that such an international treaty would only be able to achieve with the total surrender of Russia after an armed conflict, right?
True, yeah.
So,
like the Montreux Convention was agreed to by Russia, you're saying, and we would need a similar situation with this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
but it's NATO Lake now, no question.
The thing is, they're in a horrible situation here.
Yeah.
We could strangle them very easily.
They're cooked in the Baltic.
That's also one of the reasons why the fear of the use of the Russian nuclear weapons have been quite high in Finland, Sweden, and the surrounding countries, because they have this very, very horrible situation where they have to pass through the straits between Norway and Denmark and Sweden. They kind of have the same situation up here. You can't really see it on the map very well, but a lot of these seas are not easily passed in winter because of the ice. So their main fleet, which is here in Murmansk, are kind of pinpointed by NATO also here.
Yep. If I was Russia, I would be a little scared that you guys just had a giant televised conference about what to do with me.
Yeah.
Some of the only countries in Europe that take military spending seriously. They don't have the actual personnel numbers, but it's it's a very significant strategic area, I would say, for Russia, and they're pretty cooked up there. So any other? I think that's pretty much it. Huh?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and wrap it there. Thanks everyone for tuning in this week. Appreciate it. We had a lot of various bits of news to cover. Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
I have one more thing.
Sure.
So some of you might have seen the passing of David Knowles, and I think that a little tribute to his commitment to Ukraine is due. David Knowles was a journalist at the Telegraph who basically initiated and got the whole Ukraine the latest up and running, and he passed during the last weekend. And I have my routine during lunch, which is basically to listen to Ukraine the latest, because I think they do some excellent reporting and there's great guests there. And it was
one of the few pieces of
incredibly
Ukrainian content that
shocking to hear the announcement that he had passed on Monday. They only had a very brief Twitter space where they only announced the passing of Knowles, and I was I must say affected emotionally by it, because I know that there's a lot of people who are like me, listening to David Knowles every lunch or whatever morning in the US, I guess, as a routine, because they've been consistent in the reporting, and I need to give tribute to that. And I'm happy to see, though, that the team is committed to continue the work and do their podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really respect what they do over there. It's one of I'd say the few pieces of news or content that we really follow and like look up to and kind of model what we do after. We really appreciate what they do. It's really unfortunate with David, and we definitely send our condolences and our regards to everyone involved in the production over there. Does anyone else want to say anything about this?
Yeah.
No, not really. I'm in no position, so I'm sorry.
I share the same sensation of Erlend. It has been a very sad and very heartbreaking loss for everyone who followed the Telegraph and his podcast.
I want to say that I truly think that individuals like him has made a difference for Ukraine, because he's been such a strong voice for so long, and it wasn't just a podcast; it was a lot more as well. So, hopefully, it will inspire people to continue the work in his name.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we here at Tochnyi, we have a lot of opinions about various journalists and talking heads about Ukraine and so forth. I would say the main reason we started this project is because we think a lot of the opinions about Ukraine are like misinformed, or they're not deep enough and things like that. This is I think one of the few people we really looked up to as someone who's really serious and really dedicated. I mean, there's lots of people like David and like what we're trying to do, but I would say he was really one of the leading figures in what we would consider like accurate, like in-depth, on the ground reporting, not just looking for clickbait news like in Ukraine this week and Gaza next week. He really cared. He really was dedicated to doing it. And I don't know. We really look up to him and his production. So we'll go ahead and it's a sad note to end on, but we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. So thanks for everyone for tuning in this week. Thanks for listening to me ramble about the news for too long. Thanks for listening to all of the other great contributors, had more concise thoughts on what's going on in Ukraine right now and all their great analysis. So thanks to our panel for stopping by every week as they do. Thank you guys for tuning in and for your continued support of Tochnyi. You know, we're a project that was created by volunteers. We just do our best to deliver accurate information about what's going on in Ukraine. We just have a lot of professionals and analysts who do work, and we decided to sort of share information and try to figure out what's going on. So thanks for tuning in. And we broadcast every week at 2100 Kyiv time. So please do tune in next week. And yeah, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up there, and I'll just close out with Slava Ukraini.
Heroям слава.
Heroям slava.